So, what does it mean to be reborn? What does that look like? Where do we find that? What's the point of it? And how do we get to it? And do we even want it? So, I was just thinking of a car that I used to own. It was a Pontiac J2000. In other words, it was old. It was old when I bought it. It was beat up when I bought it. I think the monetary commitment was a few $100s and maybe a couple hundred more just to get it on the road. And it had like the ceiling, the padding, it was all like coming down. The dashboard was like painted like kind of like sparkly. It was somebody was trying to coolify it, and even my landlord, while it was parked in the driveway, my landlord actually hit it, smoked it with a wheelbarrow, dumped the whole wheelbarrow, scratched it, dented it. And he came to me and he was super apologetic. And I was like, well, it doesn't really matter. It'll just match the rest of the car. Like, don't worry. He gave me $50. And I was like, oh, that's a bonus. Thank you for the $50. As long as you feel you're off the hook, then we're all good. And so what does it mean to be reborn? Like, how does that car be reborn? There was a show and it was called Pimp My Ride. I don't know if anybody remembers it. I watched it a lot because they would have the most decrepit, like not even roadworthy vehicles. And then Exhibit would come in and they would take the car and then they would transform the car into something like so cool. Like they would put a it wasn't even the same car. They would take it right down to the frame. They would sand buff the frame out and just redo the whole car. Like so it wasn't even the same car. They would always put in a weird amount of speakers and subwoofers and then like crazy TVs coming out of it. And I guess back then that was super cool. Maybe it is super cool now. I just aged. And I just always remember that show of a transformation of something so beat up and broke down that you don't even want to take it on the road. Like you're kind of scared of what could happen. And to me, that's what my old life was. I never had, I wouldn't say I didn't have a good life on the inside. So one of the things that causes me to be a beat up wreck on the inside is looking to the outside to make me feel alive. And so I know that there are varying degrees of that, and some of us come from great homes and great families and great upbringings, and they felt confident inside. They felt like they belonged and fit in. But that wasn't my story. I just always felt like I didn't belong. That there was something inside of me that just was restless. I was watching my dog, and she's getting older. She's a little miniature pincher, and she's super bossy and just a little bit controlling. But we love her anyway. And so she's getting to the point where she has this chronic back pain, and so she'll just sit there and kind of cry or kind of like look at me and just go like whining sounds. And she has trouble, especially in the evening, to get comfortable. So like the other day I was watching her, she jumps on the couch, she jumps off the couch. Her nails go on the ground, click, 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 click. She's looking for like the ultimate comfort spot, which doesn't even exist. She gets to the spot, the new spot, she turns around 20 times. She doesn't sit down. She finally sits down. I'm cheering her on. I say, finally, you got it. And then she gets back up. She jumps off that couch and goes to another pillow on a different couch. And she does the same circle around and around and around. That's how I always felt. I always felt like that internally. And I needed something on the outside to make me feel alive or to make me feel comfortable. So it always felt like the beat up Pontiac J2000. And maybe that's why I love the car, because I could relate to it. And so that's what the old life looked like for me. I might have had success in school, with sports and with friends. I had success in the workplace and in the trades, with heavy equipment and elevators and all that stuff. There was some success, but to me, that wasn't living on the inside. And so I turned into substance abuse because I needed something to make me feel comfortable. I needed something to soothe me. I needed something for me to be alive, for me to be well inside, for me to be okay. And I found that the first time I drank. And the first time I drank, there became an instant battle. The battle wasn't with the alcohol and me personally because it worked. It made me feel comfortable. It made me everything that my dog is looking for. It made me feel like I just got the car back from Pimp My Ride. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. The battle actually started with my parents because I lived in a family that didn't accept drinking. Very, very rigid religious upbringing. And so there was always that going on in the background of like trying to hide it, trying to like go to a party, but I'm not allowed to be out late. Trying to hide the beer on my breath and doing the mints and that then getting into smoking cigarettes and it's just like this tension at home in my living environment. But I felt alive on the inside and I couldn't wait for the next time to drink and then try to hide it and try to minimize it and all of that stuff that came with me using a substance to make me feel alive, for me using something on the outside for me to be okay on the inside. And so some of us though have great lives. There's a guy named Fred in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and he was, I believe, a lawyer or some sort of suit wearing guy, and his kids were great, and they all did school, and everybody was fantastic. And he had a drinking problem though. So he had the same issue that I had. He just did it for a different reason. Whatever the reason is, whatever the reason we get into needing something substantial to make us feel a certain way inside, it just maybe in his life it just made it better. Like, you know what I mean? Like I have a good life, but if I did this, it would just be better. It would be more fun. It would be more exciting. It would be more exotic, whatever the case may be. The problem that he had was the same problem that I had. Over the course of time, and oh, over the course of time, I grew into this problem, and the problem developed in this manifestation of needing more of it and more often. And it developed inside of me where I started losing control. I started breaking moral boundaries that I had set for myself that seemed applicable on a societal level or a living level. You know, like being on time for work and not being intoxicated at work from the night before, that kind of stuff. Simple stuff. Um, like not going to jail on numerous occasions, not drinking and driving. Those kind of things were like just even normal people, societal moral level. I'm not talking about religious moral level. I was making my moral level for myself, but I kept pushing the boundary on that. And soon enough, over the next 4, 5, 6, 8 years, I developed more of an issue with the lack of control. So what was happening inside of me? I was developing this abnormal reaction that produces a craving for more. You might find that in food, in sugar, in gambling, in your media, your social media, your phones. You could find that in pornography and dating and even things that give you adrenaline and those kind of things. Maybe you didn't have a real problem with it before, but that's a development thing that I experienced. And then with enough evidence to never do it again, I kept doing it. And so I had this old thing on the inside, this old problem on the inside of me that I couldn't ever fix. Um, I tried to fix it in the way that I tried to minimize the collateral damage. I wanted to keep driving the Pontiac J2000 by getting it repaired in certain ways. So I made defenses, I made reasonings, I made justifications. I actually made changes to my boundaries or my moral standards. And even if they crossed the line societally, I would justify it and just say, well, boys will be boys. We roughhouse. That's just how I live. Like I accept this way of living. Going out to the bar every night, not just on Saturday night. And so that increased over the course of time, and then was fueled by intimate relationships and cocaine and speed and ecstasy. And I grew into that, and it became such a problem that essentially I couldn't hold down a job, I couldn't pay bills. My life was so dysfunctional, and the old way of living had run out. And I'm not saying that everybody's old way of living will ever run out. There are some people that can keep on old living and driving the Pontiac J2000 for a lifetime, and they can die that way. One of the things is when we have this abnormal reaction to the substances for trying to feel alive, to try to make the car run better, to be comfortable, is that when I start, I can't stop. So lack of control, and once I stop and have sufficient reason, I keep doing it again. I keep going back to it. That is a problem that has for the millennia not been able to solve. We try to solve it through human aid. We try to solve it with medication. We try to solve it with new jobs, new relationships. But the problem is always going to be in here. It centers in my mind. It's a heart problem, but it manifests itself in my mind. Um, Here we see in the big book on page 43, the alcoholic at certain times, and fill in the blank for whatever your go-to is, at certain times has no mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor other human beings can provide such a defense. His defense must come from the power of God. And so, how many defenses did I build up in my life to have a life that suited me? I tried to make these defenses and have elaborate shows of what was acceptable, what was a moral standard that I could live by, how could I live the way that I wanted to live, doing the things that I wanted to do, and still drive the Pontiac J2000. Um, I made up all the defenses and realized that it was never the problem of the first drink. It was the seventh and the eighth and the ninth. I kept changing my mind. So I never admitted that the first one was the problem. That was my old way of thinking. And so how do I know when I want to make a change? Well, number one, I got to look at my defenses and stop building defenses, stop making excuses, stop justifying, and really understand what the problem is. And the problem is the first drink, or fill in the blank, the first lustful thought, the first bite of the chocolate bar or the sugar, or the first scroll of Facebook, whatever it is. That and what I'm identifying is the thing from the outside that makes me come alive. Um, I believe that we have to get to the point where I have to understand that my thinking is never going to, I'm never going to fix my broken thinking with my broken thinking. And so what's the solution? The solution, and I'll go to two places. One is the big book and one is the Bible. The solution to all this is to be reborn. So how do I not renovate my house or fix up the car, but I get a whole new experience. I get a whole new way of thinking. And well, the word is to be reborn. And we see the concept of this going through the big book of, let's say, 164 pages of basic text. Almost half of that lies in understanding the physical and the mental problem, and then suggesting that it could all be cured by a spiritual problem. So basically, to be reborn is to not live in the physical and the emotional, but to live in a spiritual way of life. And that is to accept God as your power. Where I was having to admit that I'm powerless to live life, I'm powerless to even take my life. I got to that point where I was trying to take my life, and I had no power in life at all. So in the big book, it talks about taking such a position when we were sincerely taking a position. So, sincerely is honestly. When we sincerely take such a position, all sorts of beautiful things started to follow. All of these promises started to follow. And it says that we were reborn. It says, if we kept close to him and performed his work well, established on such a footing, we became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans, designs. We could contribute, we became more interested in what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, we enjoyed peace of mind. We, as we discovered we could face life successfully as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, thereafter. That is the what made me try to get comfortable, spinning around like my dog trying to get comfortable. And then it says we were reborn. So what position do I need to sincerely take? And I believe that people that can't be honest and sincere, so honesty, genuine, so sincere. So it says in the big book that those that can't remain sober are inconstitutionally incapable about being honest. And I believe that this is what it's talking about. So this is basically a step two problem, coming to believe in the power of God. So what position do I need to take? It says I need to take the position under being directed, to have a principal, to be fathered, and to have a new employer. So that's the concept of God and his power and authority in my life. I have to be in position to be fathered by him, to be directed by him, to be his agent. He is the principal. I'm his representation of the principal, and to be employed by him. And taking such a position, being in position for those things to happen, it's not a behavioral thing, it's a positional thing of my heart, then I will move into being reborn. But I believe that we get to be reborn at the beginning of this process because I take that position. And then we go into the third step prayer, to actually be able to continue that commitment, because the third step prayer and then the rest of the steps through 4 through, let's say, 9 is the ability to be able to bring your heart to God so that you can stay in such a position. So that's the cleansing, the cleaning, the sorting out, the exhibit pimping my ride on the inside. I have a whole new ride on the inside. So that's the process for me to be able to continue the cleansing process. And so I do that one day at a time. I am in relationship with God one day at a time, and the promises of continual rebirth will take place in my life. And so I thought of the story of Nicodemus. He was a church leader. He was prominent in the church community. He was a big deal. And he came and heard Jesus' teaching, and he asked Jesus about, like, what do I do to be saved? What are you guys, like, you're not normal. You're from God because you're doing all this cool stuff. You're doing miracles. And Jesus says, you must be born again. You must be children of light. There was the darkness, and I bring light. So being reborn is actually going from darkness to light, to being blind to being able to see. And it's not to see everybody around you, because that's what we could see and that's what kept us in the dark. But the seeing, the light is seeing inside of me on how I manifest and play God. Why am I so uncomfortable? Why am I looking for peace and serenity on the outside all the time when it's supposed to be here on the inside? And so that's the love of God that gives me the eyes to see on the inside. And so to be born again, or to be reborn, or to breathe again for the first time, I have to accept. Number one, I have to accept that I'm powerless and that I am unmanageable on the inside, and nothing on the outside is going to help that. And so basically, conceding to my inmost being is step one, coming to that place where I'm done. I can't live and I can't die. And I want to investigate something new. And then step two is admitting, coming to believe. In the big book, it talks about this cornerstone of belief in the power of God. In the Bible, it talks about Jesus being the cornerstone of our faith, which the builders rejected, which the world rejected. And so, what we're asking to get this power to be reborn is put your belief in Jesus. That gives us access to being reborn and being children of light. And then we confess. So in Life Lab, we have a step 2 prayer and a step 3 prayer, and we're confessing with our mouths. It might not be our current state, but we're confessing with our mouths that we want to be reborn, that we want to put our belief in Jesus. And so, what's the proof of being reborn? You're going to see fruit. You're going to be fruitful instead of consumeful. You're going to see that you may have self control now. That's a big deal. There was no self control in my life. I would do things first and then figure out what to do about the mistakes that I made. I would react and then I would think. I would take, I would never give. Unless there was a trade. I would see these new fruits inside. I would actually have self control that I want to hear what you have to say, that I don't always have to be first, that I don't always have to get the biggest slice of the pie, that I have endurance and perseverance, and I have love and tolerance for other people. This is the fruit of somebody being reborn. The other proof of that is pretty specific. In First John 3, verse 9, it says, "No one who is born of God will continue to sin because God's seed remains in them. They cannot go on sinning because they have been born out of God." So, due to this relationship of being reborn, I'm going to stop doing certain things. That is a proof that I've actually been reborn. I understand that there's some complexities here because that might not be your experience. Maybe you've been a chronic relapser and have relapsed for the last 10 years in a row. And you're being reborn like every couple months or every couple weeks because you keep falling into the temptation. I believe that being born again is the first step is honesty. Honestly, taking such a position. Is God your father, director, employer, principal? When we sincerely, honestly take such a position, we are in the process of being reborn. I believe once you're reborn, you're reborn. Could we revert back to it? Maybe. I understand that my thinking has been changed and reborn where I enjoy giving now instead of just taking. There are things in me that are compelled to want to meet with people and help people and never get paid in return. My whole structure of thinking and just even financially has totally been changed. Could I go back? Maybe. Because I know that fear is the igniter of a mental obsession, and that's where the mind is. And so the mental obsession will always take me back to looking for the comfort. It might not be in cocaine, but it might be in food or sugar or staying up late and watching TV and binge watching shows or whatever it is, just being distracted, looking for ease and comfort or the sense of it in outside things. And so that's kind of the revertation of being unreborn. Not sure if that's a word, but those are some of the proofs that I've been reborn. In Romans 6:4, it talks about a new purpose and a new drive inside. I've seen people like my parents adopted 2 kids. I was one of them. And we were young and they went into the mission field. The family had business. They had no reason to leave the family. And they went to Indonesia in Asia for 10 years. What makes somebody do that? And they went with nothing, like nothing. When we got there, we had hardly any money. And back in those days, it takes 2 months to transfer money, wire money. And so what makes somebody do that? Well, they're reborn. The other thing is that we go from darkness, we go from being in a family to being a part of a heavenly family, that we will spend eternity. We are adopted children. Jesus said, I will not leave you as orphans. I will come to you. And so we actually get to have an inheritance of the Spirit of God. So we go from being governed and guided and ruled and reigned by the spirit of alcohol or fill in the blank to being guided and nurtured and lit up by the Spirit of God.